Alright, so what other lighting questions? The next thing I wanted to tell you is, of course, there's all different types of lights. There's your traditional T8, which is your normal fluorescent light. Yeah, it's just the sun. We'll clean that up later. That'll get a bit bigger. So you've got your traditional fluorescent light. Now they're relatively low wattage, and they don't have much room over reef aquariums these days, except for deep water and maybe a little bit of medium water. But you need to be quite careful if you are running normal fluoros. Up from the normal fluoros, you've got your T5s. T5s look a lot like a normal fluoro, but they're very, very thin. So you can stack many of them next to each other, and they tend to be run on electronic ballast, and they're much more powerful. Then you've got your power compacts, which are basically a T5, imagine it folded in half, and there's 4 prongs at one end. That's the same as a T5. And they're really very good lighting. Then up from there is your metal halides. So your metal halides are delivering pretty much the most power. They penetrate the water the best, and but they do run a fair bit warmer. Now you're aiming for around 1 watt per litre as an average suggestion. So if you have 1 watt per litre, under most circumstances you can keep most corals in the aquarium, providing that your tank's not too deep. So, and I've got some recommendations for that. For example, if your tank is under, if you're going to run T5s or power compacts, if your tank is 2 foot or under, so 6'10" or under, you can put anything anywhere. If you're getting your 150 watt halides, you could go to probably around 762, which is about 30 inch. Then you can go up from there. So if you have 1 watt per litre light, you can pretty much put any corals anywhere you want. On the other hand, if you don't have as much light, you need to be very conscious of your layering. You need to be very conscious that your shallow water corals are going to the top and your medium water corals are going to the bottom. Then the next thing to look at is what's called a 3-week rule. You'll find that during the night I keep on talking about 3 weeks, 3 weeks, 3 weeks. 3 weeks is what I've come to believe is what's called a biological lag, and that's basically you plant the seed and you don't go looking for the seed for the little seedling next week. It takes usually about 3 weeks and the plant starts to actually grow, and that's exactly the same with the corals and the fish and everything else I talk about. Whatever you do today, you don't look for the result tomorrow. You'll look for the result in 3 weeks. And that's basically a guide that I'm suggesting. So if you put a coral in the aquarium, you put the coral in, then you look at how it goes, and if you find that it's not going the way you want it, and it's not being stung by any other corals, which is something that you need to look at, something we'll talk about a little bit more later, you move the coral. Then you give it another 3 weeks in the spot. Because remember that you're estimating where the coral would like to be, but really only when you trial where the coral wants to be do you really know. So you're using hopefully an educated guess to where you're going to put it, but at the same time don't get attached to where you put it. You just basically put it there. If it's performing the way you know it should, then bingo. If you put it there and the coral's not performing the way you want it to, after 3 weeks, then just try relocating it to another spot. So any more lighting questions before we move on, guys? So everyone understands the different types of lights. Everyone understands the different positions we want to place the corals in reference to light. The other thing we also want to talk about is replacing the light tubes and making sure that if you have any of the enclosed aquariums, one of the biggest no-nos that anyone ever does is not clean their lids. Because in a perfect world, you have, like say, halides or something where you're not actually having lids at all, because the lids are another thing that the light has to actually pass through. Got a nice spot for you down here, Shane. So really make sure that your lids are nice and clean, because that's a real no-no. Like I can't tell you how many people I've come to their house, and they said, oh, I'm doing everything, but my corals are just not growing. And straight away you go there, you look at their lids and they're filthy green or filthy with salt creep, and then they wonder why their corals are not going well. So lids are really something to look at. Make sure that they're clean. It's really important. And make sure that you're replacing your fluorescents about every 9 months. Make sure that you're replacing your power compacts or T5s about every year, and make sure you're replacing your halides at most every 18 months. And when you do replace the lights, it's good to stagger replace them. So replace one of them, then maybe next week replace another one, then maybe next week replace another one. Particularly if you haven't replaced them for a while, because you don't want to shock the corals that are in there. Because what happens when you shock them is they drop out their zooanthellae. Because if they think, hey, I don't need this much zooanthellae anymore, and they're worried about over-oxidizing or they get too much oxygen within them, if they've got too much zooanthellae, when there's a very high light source, so they'll often shed out their zooanthellae, which is called bleaching. And so it's good to replace. I haven't actually ever seen that happen, but I've certainly heard about it. So we're all cool with lighting. So what we're summing up from lighting is we're saying we either get corals that suit the lights that we have, or we get lights that suit the corals we want. Now, nearly everything that I just said then gets reduplicated with water flow, and they're worried about over-oxidizing or they get too much oxygen within them if they've got too much zooanthellae when there's a very high light source, so they'll often shed out their zooanthellae, which is called bleaching. And so it's good to replace. I haven't actually ever seen that happen, but I've certainly heard about it. So we're all cool with lighting. So what we're summing up from lighting is we're saying we either get corals that suit the lights that we have, or we get lights that suit the corals we want. Now, nearly everything that I just said then gets reduplicated with water flow.